indisputable.
Universal health care, raising the minimum wage. If you want clean water, clean air, clean food, keep going. If you are doing the deed, I want you to stand up to your feet right now. We have courage enough, conviction enough, people power enough to stand up and do what is right for ourselves. I am unbought and unbought.
Good afternoon and welcome to Unbossed. I'm your host, Nina Turner. So glad you're here. This is one of the best hours of your day. Go ahead and phone a friend or send them a text or a message in a bottle on the train, not carrying chemicals though, and let them know. Come on and tune in. And today, do we have a treat? This young man I have admired from afar because he kicks the knowledge on social media like very few people do. And that is Professor Conscious Lee. Professor, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Feeling even more groovy, like an Austin Powers movie now. I'm with the senator, you know.
I'm feeling groovy too. I like that word. I am so glad you're here. As I was saying, I have admired you from afar. And before the show started, we were talking about how we have mutual admiration for one another. You are the truth. And speaking of the truth, congratulations on winning one of the NAACP Image Awards.
I was just nominated. Shout out to Kev on stage. He won, but yes, it was an honor to be nominated.
Won. In my book, you were a winner, but you were nominated for NAACP Award, which is tremendous in and of itself. Do you want to share with the viewers about how that felt to have that honor?
I think that it was amazing for me to be admired, or actually it was amazing for me to be acknowledged by a lot of my peers. I'm just a small town country boy, so to have my work acknowledged along the work of people that I watched growing up on TV, or even some of the people that inspired me, it was very rewarding. And in many instances, it felt a little liberating, just to make sure that my work is not going unnoticed. And, I feel like giving me an extra little spark, to keep on going. It's been amazing.
Absolutely. Your work is not in vain, and you are amazing. And thanks for using your platform and your profile to really lift the truth on a variety of issues. And you do it in such a way that it makes people think. Sometimes you use a little satire, sometimes you go straight at it, but you certainly are a master teacher, and that is a beautiful thing. So we are so glad to have you here and hope you'll join our show many, many times. So today, Professor Conscious Lee and I are gonna cover a few things. We're gonna talk about East Palestine, again, EP, got to talk about that on a regular basis because anything like this could happen to a town near you, so we cannot forget about them. CPAC came to town and you won't believe what these ghouls had to say. And later in the show, we'll discuss President Biden's trip to Selma. Many of you may know we were celebrating, it's not a celebration, but recognizing the anniversary of Bloody Sunday. And President Biden went there like most presidents do. And we got something to say about that. So stay tuned to that. First, we're going to talk about the effects of the derailment in other places. And particularly, we want to talk about what the workers have to say about some of the new bills that are percolating through the Congress. So it's been over a month since the derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. People are living near the chemical disasters, are seeing all kinds of contamination, and even across the state lines in the state of Pennsylvania. The Guardian did reporting on the effects of the small rural town next door to East Palestine, Darling Township. And this is what their reporting says. The toxic cloud engulfed Darlington Township, a small rural community with 1,800 residents, coating lawns, crops, and cars in black soot. Darling is a small rural community where hunting, deer, fishing, and planting vegetable gardens are common activities for residents who rely on private water wells, which they, not regulators, must monitor for quality. And this is what one resident stated about the situation there. We wanted to get away, even though we live outside the evacuation radius, but had nowhere to go. Over this way, we've not been told anything about the implications. It's very concerning. I have a 7-month-old daughter, so I'm doing everything I can to make sure she is safe. No one is coming to save us, so we have to stick up for ourselves. And that is coming from Patrick Diddleman of Darling Township resident sharing with us what the family is going through right now. And so for reference, we want to put up this map so that you can see the distance between each town. And as you can see, the little red or maroon is East Palestine. You see East Liverpool, Steubenville, all of that in Ohio. And as you cross over the line into Pennsylvania, you can see how close Darlington is actually to East Palestine. Now, sisters and brothers, family, friends, we know that air and water and soil, all of that stuff, they know no boundaries. So it would make a whole lot of common sense, even though my grandmother told me common sense ain't that common. It would make a whole lot of common sense for state regulators and federal regulators to trace a radius, to reach out to residents, like not just at the epicenter, but in and around that epicenter to see how they roll and how they feel and what is happening in their lives. We got to stay up on this because again, it was East Palestine, it could be somewhere else tomorrow. Now, Norfolk Sutherland has pleaded almost 12 million to East Palestine, but that does not include Darlington at all, not at all. And take a look at this. Norfolk Southern, which reported $3 billion in profits last year, has committed $11.8 million to East Palestine and said it will review individual requests from those outside the township zip code. That's not good enough. I want all of you to know we're going on record or unbossed to say that's not good enough. And that is why government needs to step in. So Professor, your thoughts about what is happening in East Palestine and other places, not just in Ohio, but all over the country. We just had a recent derailment in Springfield, Ohio, and derailments are happen all over this country. But this one is extra sensitive because of the chemicals that train was carrying.
Well, I think everything we're seeing is the result of our country and different policymakers having more value for profits of the people. I think when we think about when we're able to make an analysis and see how policy has made it where different railroad companies have been able to just fall back on regulation, fall back on cutting corners and not having to pay extra money for it, different, what's the word I'm looking for here? Different, I have to get a word here. Different inspections. This is kind of what happened, I think, you know what I mean? And it's just the last thing I'll say, it's sad to recognize that people in the global north in one of the richest countries in the world are now dealing with some of the ugly impacts of things that we think that should always go on, or think that we think always go on in the global south. Excuse me for a minute, my words just all over the place right now.
No, that's okay. No, I know people are feeling what you're trying to say, and it is absolutely, we are a hegemon nation. This shouldn't happen anywhere in the world, but especially a nation as wealthy as the United States of America. So it is my sincere hope that the people with the power, being the transportation secretary, the state of Ohio, all of this stuff, we really do need to get this stuff fixed right away. Zip codes shouldn't matter. Now the benefit, we got to continue to look at this, but like East Palestine, people here are furious. They're furious because they're not getting any attention and they deserve to be furious. People are furious and they want Norfolk Sutherland to be held accountable. They should be held accountable. Norfolk Sutherland should bounce. But first and foremost, they want clear information and guidance on how best to protect themselves and their families from long-term health complications. And that is not too much to ask. Now, another town, Steubenville, also shared these concerns. We're already dealing with as much pollution, and the Black community is often the last to know about health risks. Everyone deserves clean water, soil, and air. The community garden is the only place some people can get fresh produce. Is East Palestine going to destroy what we're doing here? And that is coming from a Steubenville resident, just basically saying, hey, what about us? And that question is vitally important. What about us? What about all the people who are being impacted from this, both now and into the future? We will be right back after this.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
Meanwhile, in the Arctic, you know where this is going. You watch the Damage Report, the Arctic's on fire. Obviously, why would we be talking about the Arctic except to tell you that it's melting once again? The Republicans aren't that interested in it. I wonder why. Lift out of poverty up to 3.7 million people, including an estimated 1.3 million children. Hashtag save the children? Not if it costs money. I mean, come on.
What's happening? I'm Dr. Rashad Richey, host of Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey. Here's the bottom line. I play no games about policy, period. Too many people's lives are at stake. So here's what I do. I challenge conservative ideology that hinders the growth of this country. I make sure we place our facts in proper context, and I have no problem debating anyone on a position that I have. Progressives have the ideas to change the world, but when you really look at it, progressives have always change this world for the better. I want you to tune into my new show, Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey, right here on the TYT Network, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time. I'll see you there.
Everything that we've accomplished over the years is because of our members who've allowed us to remain independent of corporate interests and reach 20 million followers. Now is the time to bring as many people into the progressive movement as possible. We're inviting you to be the change and help bring a community-powered progressive change machine to life. Details are at tyt.com/change. If you're a member, thank you. We need you to remain so. If you're one of the thousands of viewers out there who's not a member yet, the time has come for you to join now. We need you more than ever. tyt.com/change. The rest of the news media says you should not fight for positive change. If you do, you're not really a reporter or a journalist, because reporters and journalists don't care what happens. I don't agree. That's not written anywhere. That's not a law. It's just a rule that they invented so that reporters didn't actually challenge the people that are in power. Well, we don't agree with that. We think we should challenge the people in power, that actually makes you a better journalist, not a worse one. Here at the Young Turks, we do our best to bring you the most essential news stories of the day, but we can't cover everything in a 2-hour show. And for the rest, I recommend Ground News. Founded by a former NASA scientist, Ground News uses a revolutionary system that analyzes where the news is coming from and gives you complete transparency on the potential biases these sources may have. That way, you can read between the lines of media bias and break free from the corporate media agenda. In arming you with the context and transparency, you'll have everything you need to think critically about the news and build responsible media literacy for yourself and others. With Ground News, you're not just mindlessly consuming the media, you're part of a movement that is working to hold them accountable and get straight to the facts. Break through the filter bubbles, the propaganda, and the bias, and subscribe to Ground News today.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
The show. We're gonna share some viewer comments here. Y'all know this is my favorite part of the show. From the TYT members, Cray Cray, the Senator, and Conscious Lee. What a team. Indeed. I agree with you on that, Cray Cray. And on Twitch, we got Spencer, Nina, Leanna Spencer. Well, thank you for that, darling. I appreciate you. And Dungard Dragon. Hey, DD, good to see you. Or read your comments, I should say. Senator Nina Turner, the Black Pearl Dragon. Give me some fire, mama, exclamation point. Thank you, Dungard Dragon. I appreciate that. And on YouTube, super chat by Prov. Yes, the Conscious Lee is awesome with all exclamation points. Yes, Conscious Lee is indeed awesome. And all of you are awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you. Now, rail workers give a warning. Many of you know last week we covered some stories about the fact that you have members of the Congress in both chambers who have introduced legislation to try to stop what happened in East Palestine from happening again. Good on them. But rail workers are sounding the alarm that some of these bills may have some unintended consequences, like gaping loopholes. Imagine that, loopholes in legislation. No, that would never happen in the United States of America. Let's put up this headline. Rail workers warn safety bill loopholes are big enough to run a freight train through. If the language is not precise, the class 1 railroads will avoid the scope of the law without violating the law, yet again putting the safety of our members and American communities into harm's way, said one union leader. And this reporting is coming from Common Dreams. Amid heightened national focus on railway safety in the wake of East Palestine, Ohio disaster, and other recent accidents, one railroad workers union warned Friday that while they welcome a bipartisan rail safety bill has loopholes big enough to operate a 7,000-foot train through. In other words, freight train coming through because this legislation has loopholes. Now, they sounded the alarm like they usually do about this time. They sounded the alarms about the fact that the crews are understaffed. They let us know that ahead of time. They also let us know that situations like the one that happened in East Palestine could happen. They warned us about that. And all while the 117th Congress and this president stopped their ability to go on strike, to strike for better wages, better benefits, better work conditions, more importantly, better work conditions. Their main focus for this last strike that they wanted to go on, they didn't want to go on, but they were being forced to try to do something to make the bosses listen to them, was just to have paid sick leave. Now, y'all all know that. We all old enough to remember that. At the 117th Congress, they stopped that from happening. Now, the Railway Safety Act of 2023 was introduced earlier last week, and it is by Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio, or earlier this week, I should say, J.D. Vance, Bob Casey, Marco Rubio, John Fetterman, and Josh Hawley. So you see bipartisan, Democrat, Republican, and you see Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio. Now, this act is meant to prevent future train disasters like the derailment that happened in East Palestine. The legislation would impose limits on freight train lengths, which in some cases currently exceed 3 miles. The measure was introduced a day after Democratic US Reps Ro Khanna and Chris D'Aluzzo put forth a bill that would require the US Department of Transportation to impose stricter regulations on trains carrying hazardous materials. And we want to thank Common Dreams for this reporting. Look, I was talking to a dear friend of mine, and the point that he made was the train shouldn't be more than four cars. And that makes a whole lot of sense if you're putting people over profits, because if you're carrying hazardous materials like that, those trains should not be long like that. But these people, they don't care because they always put profits over people. Let's put up this headline. Khanna D'Aluzzo unveiled Derail Act to prevent another disaster like East Palestine. We can't trust giant corporations like Norfolk Southern to keep communities safe out of the goodness of their hearts. And the representative is totally right about that. Now, the Railroad Workers United, they had this. This is what they tweeted: with loopholes big enough to operate a 7,000-foot train through this legislation essentially codifies a path to single-person crews on many, if not the majority of trains. So in other words, the workers are saying that what the senators are trying to accomplish is not being accomplished in that legislation. They need to take a look at it and do something about it. Professor Lee, your thoughts?
I'm from small town America. I'm a proud product of small town America. And it didn't take me long to realize that our lived experiences is always gonna be collateral damage for the profits that big corporations able to generate in the big city. So when we start thinking about how policy is curated and start thinking about what constituents are accounted for, we're usually able to think about how poor and working class people in small town America is always getting the short end of the stick. So we recognizing that these companies was able to generate billions of dollars and was able to drop a few couple million, you know what I'm saying, in the bucket to be able to say, hey, we did something. So for me, it's thinking about how I have a hard time separating big business and big government, and how a lot of the people that claim to be proponents in opposition to big government is usually the people that's always facilitating big business, getting away with big government to be able to have tragedies like what happened in Palestine.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, absolutely. And part of the problem here, the challenge here is that the owner donors control big government. They control these elected officials, and that's why the rules skew in their, not just skew, the rules are in their favor. And every time the workers stand up either to try to unionize or strengthen their unions or to change the rules, the people who have the political power 9 times out of 10, they gonna side with their owner donors. And that is what is wrong primarily in this country, in the body politics. And that's why we need campaign finance reform. And Professor, also, they being these so-called policymakers, should come and see what small town America has to say about this. And so while I definitely applaud the legislation coming from both the House of Representatives led by Representative Ro Khanna and also the Senate, they need to get to find out not only what the rail workers have to say about it, but what do the communities surrounding these train tracks have to say about what could be necessary to make them safe. So the rail workers are saying they're gonna keep on pushing on this, and I'm glad that they are. We will keep on covering this. And speaking of trains, planes, and automobiles, but we're gonna stay with trains. I just had to say that. Springfield, Ohio, we had a train derailment. Take a look at this. Yeah, that just happened in Springfield, Ohio, and it's a problem. Now, in this country, we accept about 1,000 train derailments a year. It should not be acceptable. You have the current Secretary of Transportation, one of the first things out of his mouth when he was being critiqued and held to account over what happened in East Palestine, he said, oh, but we have about 1,000 a year. And I know people are paying attention to East Palestine, but we have 1,000 a year. Let me tell you something, we shouldn't accept it. We should not accept it from any administration. So, when you know better, you ought to do better. We know better and we ought to do better. Professor, I see you wanting to really jump on in here. Go ahead.
Because listen, some dots just went off, right? Wasn't a few months ago, it was the railroad workers that was trying to, get a day off?
Yes.
When it's the same people, right? So you showed us the receipts that showed that this industry been experiencing record high profits, correct?
Correct.
So when we recognize that the individuals these record high profits been made off of, you said that somebody that you talked to said that they should be only carrying 4 carts. I'm 32 years old. In my 32 years of living, I've never seen a short train with only 4 carts. Whether they was carrying cargo, humans, cars, tires, or hazardous materials, I've never seen that before. So go back to why I was like, come back.
Come back.
The individuals that was doing the majority of this labor, that's taking the highest risk and making it where they can't go home with their family. The ones that's carrying 30 of the trains, is like,
yeah,
what's going on?
I mean, the East Palestine train, it was 150 cars long, and what this intellectual is saying, who really studies and looks at these things, what he is saying is that if you are going to transport hazardous materials, then you need to make sure that the car, that you limit the number of cars so that if something happens, you limit the damage. And I'm like, Eureka, that makes a whole lot of sense. Why them geniuses, in the Congress can't think of that? You know why they can't think of that? Because they controlled by their owner donors.
But take care of your labor force too. Take care of your labor force. The same individuals that was parading that type of policy are the same people that in election time that's gonna try to convince you and I they care about working class Americans. They're gonna try to convince you and I they care about poor working Americans and rural Americans. And we seen in terms of the impact of this policy, that is not true. So when we say take care of the workers, it's like, hey, the individuals that are literally risking their lives for you to experience record high profits, why do they have to protest and go to the highest courts of the field to be able to get a day off? They ain't even asking for a raise.
Come on.
They
Why
ain't even in one of the highest paying industries.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. They shouldn't have to protest. And don't forget, we both are old enough to remember last year, the 117th Congress stopped, and this president stopped them from being able to use the strongest tool in their toolbox, which is to be able to go on strike. And you know what they said? That the economy would just, okay, we get it. So if the economy would just explode, why not give those workers what they were asking for?
Because you don't value their labor. And we think, and to me, not only don't value their labor, you see that the individuals that do that type of labor, they seen as being exposable and disposable. Literally, hey, when we talking about the midterms of the national election, all I'm saying is small town America, regardless of your gender, regardless of your race, regardless of your industry. If you live in small town America, was born in small town America like I was, remember who remembered you in these times of needs. Remember that.
Come on, remember that. There should be a consequence at the ballot box. Remember who actually cared about you. And Professor, I went to East Palestine. I mean, the fear and the anger was thick. You could cut it. And those people have a right to be angry and fearful all at the same time. So look, Professor Snyder, another professor, he hit the nail on the head with his tweet. This is what he tweeted. Maybe deregulating everything and letting public infrastructure decay was a mistake. Just maybe it was, Professor Snyder. You did that very simply. It didn't take a whole lot of words to make it plain that maybe that kind of stuff does not work. And then my stunt double, she had this to say on social media. Nationalize the railroads. Just go and do that. Just go and put an end to this foolishness and mayhem right here. Because as long as it is commodified, these railroad companies are going to continue to do what they do to thwart the ability of folks to be able to live a good life in these small communities, and also from the workers. They're gonna continue to stop the workers from being safe, and then none of us are safe. So that's what we saying. We rocking and rolling here. All right, CPAC is acting up yet again. This trans genocide. Take a look at this.
There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages. If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
You got folks in there clapping their hands. They don't even know what this dude is saying. Do y'all understand what this man is saying? So it's our transgender sisters and brothers and family and friends today. Who is it going to be tomorrow? What you just watched was Daily Wire, Michael Knowles calling for transgender genocide. He said it must be eradicated. Those were his exact words. This is what this dude just said. This is what he said. And the elimination, eradication of transgender people of all ages. Knowles is articulating a position on trans rights that is rapidly becoming normalized on the right. Now, his reason for saying what he said was even worse. Watch this from February.
That's what the transgender activists say. They say, forget about biological sex. My gender expression doesn't have to have anything to do with my biological sex. Okay, well then there can't be a genocide. That refers to genetics. But furthermore, nobody's calling to exterminate anybody, because the other problem with that statement is that transgender people is not a real ontological category. It's not a legitimate category of being.
Professor, I'm gonna just let you jump in here. If people just can see your reactions while all this stuff is playing, just go ahead, jump right on in.
Just as a professor that has done a little bit of reading on postmodernity and post-structuralism, I'm just curious, what literature has he read on ontology? You know, what knowledge has he gained that give him the jurisdiction to make ontological claims on trans identity? Especially if the way the other clip you just showed, the way he talked about transgenderism, I can tell he allergic to literature that talk about trans identities. So for me, it's like, hey man, I better not be able to go through none of the archive to see this gentleman right here talking on side of me, talking anything about all lives mattering. He better not say nothing about the Constitution. Nothing about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And he better not say nothing about the freedom of speech. He better say nothing about freedom of religion. Because it sounds like to me, the only way that he can give legitimacy to any claim he made is being able to evoke something about his religious identity. And how that religious identity is being invoked on because people are able to live their lives the way they want to. For me, I think people think very deeply about shallow and they drown down in their own shallow understanding. You feel what I'm saying? I'm gonna end this rant by saying, if you ain't read no books and or had meaningful conversations with somebody from the trans community, I don't think you have any grounds to make any declarations about how they should live their lives or their existence in public life.
There it is. There it is. And he doesn't know what the definition of genocide is either. And that's really simple because before he even get deep into what you talking about, the brother needs to just educate himself. Well, you know what? He ain't a brother. He's a dude. Please forgive me because I want to cuss right now. This is horrible because as I said, it's our transgender sisters, brothers, family, and friends today. Who are they becoming after next? There's something wrong with this kind of mentality. And Professor Lee, I love how you said he better not quote the Constitution about liberty for all. You know, liberty for all means all, or is it only the people that he thinks are deserve liberty and justice? Yeah, I think that's what this is what these folks are up to. So the reaction on Twitter was massive and people were quick to call out this alarming stance, and it is alarming. And even when I looked at that audience, I did see some folks, not everybody was clapping, far too many people were clapping, but some people were looking very uncomfortable with some of that stuff that he was saying in that audience. I will say that. Now, maybe that's just me being hopeful, but I did see some of those people. Now, a senior reporter at Huffington Post, they put out this tweet. Take a look at this. Transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. Daily Wire host Michael Knowles says at CPAC to Cheers in the middle of a straight up eliminationist anti-trans tirade. F this shit. Yeah, that. Right there. I wanted to say that F word so badly, but I controlled myself. And to which Parker Molly chimed in, adding, "Hey, this is really scary shit. And I wish the assholes who keep insisting that there aren't any major legislative attacks on trans people of all ages helping right now, talking about you at Jonathan Chait, would stop lying about that. Things are getting very bad." So Molly was right, Mathis were right as they are laying this out. This shows that in the past year, anti-trans bills were not meant to protect children as they make the claim. That's what they claim in a lot of the stuff that they're doing. It wasn't that. It was meant to push a hateful agenda to eliminate a group of people. That's really what this boils down to for these people. And as we move deeper into the legislative cycle, we must begin to take stock of what is happening in states all across this country. Again, transgender sisters and brothers and family and friends today, who will it be tomorrow? Let's take a look at this map right here that shows you in a color-coded way what is happening in terms of anti-trans legislation. The exclamation points that you see, imminent potential to raise risk category. So you see it, worst active anti-trans laws is in the red, high risk, and so on and so forth. So this stuff is real. People are not making this up, and we have a problem right now in this country. This is one of those problems, and this is not, and Professor, this is not, people getting caught up in. This is not about. This is about a group of people who are being singled out, just plain and simple. And we don't require nobody to critique this. This is what this is about. Period. It's simple.
Just target it. I think just me being down south, just real quick, right? We can see that a lot of political arguments are being pushed by being able to appeal to the care for kids, the care for youth. What about the kids? There are a lot of trans youth that are also being caught up as collateral damage in how conservatives are literally using them to embolden their base. Now, as an educator, I can't talk about the LGBT community in the classroom because a lot of people don't know the difference between sex and gender. So if I say anything about, you feel me, transness, it's gonna be conflated into me trying to push my students to being trans.
Right.
We also recognize that the same breath, the people that are able to push these policies are able to talk about the LGBT community as they freely choose, as long as it's getting their people to go vote and making them feel imperial paranoia. Hey, what about the kids? All lives matter.
The paranoia part is key. I mean, that right there is key. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this, but I'm telling you, America, we shouldn't, please, this is not right. All right, what's happening to CPAC is not right, and it is percolating all across this country. It is wrong. So it's that group today. What group will it be tomorrow? It's gonna be some group of people that you love or some issue that you love. We need to put a stop to this madness. Mile-long food banks, take a look at this.
I don't think most people have any idea what is going on here.
I mean, people are not going to be sitting in their car for 6 to 7 hours for food at a food pantry if they didn't need it.
I pulled in here at 4 o'clock this morning. The last time we were down here, the line was all the way back to the freeway, all the way back to the parkway.
To the intersection.
I'd say that's close to a mile from right here. I know it is.
When we get our checks, we have to pay bills. And then you got to buy what little you need and what little food stamps you get SNAP, so.
$350, something like that. And then after it's over, it went back down to what it was before, about $140. But still, the mayonnaise and everything else stayed high. So it didn't equal out.
This is terrible. So what you just watched, those were people in Hazel Green, Kentucky, waiting in a mile-long line in traffic just to get some food from a food bank following the end of SNAP benefits. Now, the SNAP benefits were extended due to the pandemic, and the Senate has declared, and this president has declared that the pandemic is over because they have the authority to declare the pandemic over. But Danny Blair vividly recalling receiving the letter announcing that his pandemic era benefits to help buy groceries was about to be slashed. Kentucky lawmakers have voted to end the state's health emergency last spring by default, cutting food stamp benefits created to help vulnerable Americans like Blair weather the worst of the COVID-19. Instead of $200 a month, he's gonna get now $30 a month. And it's not just happening in state legislatures. Again, the feds, the Senate, the United States Senate declared that the pandemic was over. And you will hear people, especially in Congress, not all, but some of those elected officials, let me just go ahead and close that up a little bit, walk around and act like it's over, but it's not over. Again, if they were not living in a bubble, and if they took the time to talk to some of the constituents that they're supposed to be representing, they would know that people are still suffering. They were suffering before the pandemic. The pandemic made their suffering deeper, and they're still suffering right now. So throwing people into hunger is a policy choice, just plain and simple. What kind of choices are being made with our tax dollars? The choice to allow people to starve, to be food insecure. It is a policy choice. And quite frankly, it should be, it's just really a sin and a shame. It should be a crime to do this. The United States just doesn't get the requisite attention of other nations that starve its people because the land of the free, home of the brave. See, we're not critiqued in the same way that some of these other nations are, but we should be critiqued in that same way, because in this nation, allowing people to starve. You know, Professor Lee, one of my colleagues, Alan, he is the director of PDA. And one of the things he said when I was in California last, we were walking down the street and there was a homeless gentleman, laying on the streets. And he said, you know what, no other species would walk past one of their own in that condition. In other words, we're mammals too, like we're supposed to be the higher order, but others in the animal kingdom would not allow one of theirs to just languish like that without doing something about it. And that really struck me. I mean, that is something that has stuck with me since that conversation. Very vivid. And he's absolutely right. Just walking over people. And I don't mean people just walking down the street every single day. I'm talking about policies that would not allow people to languish in poverty and allow people to be hungry or food insecure. There are a lot of people who do have a roof over their head and they're still food insecure. My family was one of those families once upon a time when I was growing up.
Definitely. Hey, as somebody that was born and raised on food stamps, HUD, all the government assistance things you can get, I think that it just speaks volumes of what this country is at. You know what I mean? I think that when I was learning about international relations and I fell in love with thinking about international history, I learned about dynasties and how the rise and fall of dynasties, how they happen, and just how capitalism in this instance, it make it where we out of there. What we know the distinction between humans and animals is animals don't govern their lives by capitalism. They only have their lives dictated by it. Humans, our lives are governed by capitalism and our lives are dictated by capitalism. So we see how we're able to justify, hey, your value of your life is dedicated and predicated off of how much you work. If you don't work, you don't eat, therefore you have no value. If your labor don't have no value, that means you don't have no value. And if you're on the streets poor and you can't eat, that's your fault, nobody else's. And that's really the way in which capitalism is a dehumanizing system, where we're able to victim blame and blame people for their own shortcomings or their own, they own like tribulations. You see what I'm saying? And just to end it, the world hate poor people. America uniquely hates poor people and loves to monetize the struggles and suffering of poor people at the expense of poor people.
Yeah, they do. I mean, this is really quite stunning. And what is happening in Kentucky, it'd be one thing if it was just happening in Kentucky, not good if it was just happening in Kentucky, but it's not happening just in Kentucky. It's happening nationwide, right? All over the country. Let's put this up. The latest cuts to one of the nation's vital social safety net programs will limit how much food an estimated 31 million Americans will be able to afford each month, testing whether the Biden administration and state leaders can take away assistance without exacerbating a growing food insecurity crisis. No, it's going to exacerbate it, and that reporting is coming from the Washington Post. The pullback of federal supplemental nutrition assistance program benefits is part of a broader effort by the government to unwind some of the billions of dollars spent to help protect jobs or boost incomes for Americans during the pandemic. This makes no sense whatsoever. None. What the feds are doing is illogical. What these states are doing is illogical and it's inhumane. And it should not be able to happen, but it is able to happen. And over the past 18 months, the federal government has halted enhanced unemployment benefits and ended pandemic era child tax credits. It is in the process of rolling back an adjustment to Medicaid that boosted enrollment, putting millions of Americans at risk of losing coverage again, reporting coming from the Washington Post. But meanwhile, Congress comes together passionately to dish out over $1 trillion to the military industrial complex. They cannot help themselves on that. Evidence from research shows that the SNAP participation reduces food insecurity as much as 30% and even more effective among children and those facing very low food insecurity or food security. That is severe. A severe form of food insecurity characterized by disrupted eating patterns and reduced food intake. And we know this is no way for anybody to live. If any of the viewers, if any of you have even suffered through not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, or you know somebody, you know that this is absolutely no way to live. I'm a witness. Professor Lee just said he a witness, and I know plenty of people who are witnesses to just flat out don't have enough food to eat. Shame on America for this. We're gonna go straight to Selma. Take a look.
Right to vote, to have your vote counted, is the threshold of democracy and liberty. With it, anything's possible. Without it, without that right, nothing is possible. And this fundamental right remains under assault. And together we're saying loud and clearly that in America, hate and extremism will not prevail, although they are rearing their ugly head in significance now. Silence, as the saying goes, silence is complicity. And I promise you, my administration will not remain silent. I promise you.
I call on Black Jesus. Let me just say this. What President Biden was offering was platitudes, just cut and dry. Voting rights are under attack, and there's no doubt about it. And it wasn't under attack in the 117th Congress. Now listen, unbossed viewers, you hear me talk about the 117th Congress a lot, and I'm gonna continue to do that because that's when Democrats have full control of both the House and the Senate and the presidency of the United States of America. And they didn't do anything about these voting rights. They're not doing anything to ensure that people who protect those rights get elected in state legislatures all across this country or governor's mansions. So to sit up there and tell us what we already know without using the power that is already in your hands makes no sense to me. But what really have they done? Right? Let's put up this headline right here. John Lewis voting rights bill fails in the Senate amid rise of GOP-led state restrictions. We knew that was gonna happen, and so that's why the time for them to act would have been in the 117th Congress. The assault on voting rights is nothing new for the GOP. This is what they're doing because they can't beat straight up, so they gotta cheat. And the way that they cheat is by changing the rules of the game. They were doing that when Congressman John Lewis was still alive, and instead of fighting back, we get nothing but lip service and PR stunts from many of our elected officials. But this is just par for the course. And President Biden is not the only one that does this. Take a look at this.
Diversity in all walks of life and a cherished role in helping those beyond our borders to overcome their own racial and ethnic and tribal and religious conflicts. We have built that bridge to the 21st century we can all walk across.
And we will never forget joining him in Selma, Alabama for the 50th anniversary of his march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where we got to watch President Barack Obama thank John as one of his heroes.
239 years after this nation's founding, our union is not yet perfect, but we are getting closer.
I wish that was the case. President Obama is right. We not there. I wish we were getting close. At some moments you kind of feel like we are, and the other moments we not. I mean, we just covered a story last week where a representative in the great state of Tennessee is adding on to an execution bill. Not only do they got the firing squad, this dude had the nerve to say, "Oh, can I add an amendment to that?" Lynching by tree. I mean, he said that by tree. I mean, we can't make this stuff up. And it's really time out for them to talk the talk. It's time to walk the walk by initiating policies that will actually change the situation that we're in right now.
I just think that there are a lot of well-meaning liberals and a lot of well-meaning Democrats. My grandfather always said the pathway to hell was paved with good intentions. So what I'm about to say, I'm not accusing nobody of malicious intent. However, I recognize there are a lot of people that are lost in the sauce of symbolism. Symbolism don't really help the live reality of a lot of people that y'all trying to get at. You see what I'm saying? Senator already acknowledged there are different tools that you have politically that you're not really using. You see what I'm saying? I already made the statement that the country don't like poor people. To me, what we've seen all those presidents do throughout history is make a push to the middle. I don't care about the poor people on that side or that side. I only care about the moderates. And you know what I'm gonna say? I'm gonna say a little thing for lip service to make sure I'm able to acknowledge this for them over there without pissing them off over there too much. And we see that Biden is doing this right now. You see what I'm saying? So for me, getting ready for this next election that's coming about, is just thinking about, hey man, a lot of your political ops, they already drew a line in the sand. Why is you still playing this respectability, moderate game? Well, you're not saying what it is. The last I would say, y'all know my motto is education is elevation. What does it mean for President Biden to go down there to Selma? And in most other states that's below the Mason-Dixon line, can't even teach about it.
Come on.
Can't even teach about it.
Come on.
So
say that.
I don't know what that symbolism means if I can't even talk about the significance and the implications of what happened in Selma in the classroom.
That's it. And you know what? Symbols without substance. Because I would never say that a symbol doesn't matter. Because in some cases, certain type of symbol, I mean, both of us, symbols can motivate people, but symbols without substance mean absolutely nothing. I would rather have a substance, and you can skip over the symbol. I'll make my own symbol. But that's what's going on here. So, John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, he walked the walk. We know he's one of the youngest people. He got hit over the head for this. He's so many unnamed heroes of the civil rights movement too, because we know a lot of names, but there are so many people who gave all that they could and sacrificed so much to get voting rights for Black people in this country, only to see them roll back. And each time voting rights or social justice, every time we try to surmount a hurdle, somebody's trying to push us back. And just because people might be able to jump over the hurdle does not mean that the hurdle does not exist. There is a clear and present danger here.
I like that.
Because of these governors and these state legislatures. One of the things they will continue to say, oh, but so-and-so voted and the voting has increased. Yeah, because some people are just determined to go out and vote. But just because they jumped the hurdle doesn't mean that the hurdle was not there, and it should not be there. Democratic officials especially name drop on civil rights all the time. The freedom fighters, they drop in their names all the time, as if they're going to return to do their jobs for them. Like none of those civil rights heroes and sheroes are coming up out of the grave to do what they've already done and what those of us who are here right now should do, especially people with extra special titles, they should be doing right now in real time. And so I don't want people to forget, because I don't want to just make this about platitudes. I want you to understand that Bloody Sunday was real, and it is real recent history. Meaning that there are still elders walking right now in our communities who actually were, they still here. They doing that. If they walking, I mean they still here, duh. But they live this thing. It's not somewhere in the past. It's recent, right? It is recent. And that, yeah, I mean, it's just, and then the Gen X, my generation, was just being born in the late 60s or into the early 70s. So this ain't ancient history. This is history right now. Let's put up with the MLK Center. Today, the first Sunday in March, we commemorate Bloody Sunday, a momentous day in the civil rights movement. On Sunday, March the 7th, 1965, nonviolent marchers led by John Lewis and Hosea Williams were beaten and attacked by state troopers. This is real. This is real recent. And Congressman Lewis recalled that day. Take a look.
A man by the name of John Cloud identified himself and said, "I'm Major John Cloud of the Alabama State Troopers."
It's detrimental to your safety to continue this march, and I'm saying that this is an unlawful.
This was an unlawful march, will not be allowed to continue.
You are ordered to disperse, go home, or go to your church.
I said, "Major, may I have a word?" He said, "There will be no word." You saw these men putting on their gas masks. He said, "Troopers, advance."
Troopers here, advance.
They came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, trampling us with horses, releasing tear gas.
Those words of Congressman John Lewis. Now he's no longer here with us, but he's already done his job. Now it's time for us to do ours in his memory and the memories again of so many others whose names we do not know. Now put up this headline: nearly a third of Americans were alive during Jim Crow. Nearly a third of Americans were alive during Jim Crow. Again, yet another reminder that none of this is ancient history. The reality is when it comes to civil rights, history is repeating itself. And it is a continuation of the fight. We cannot look past the horrors of Bloody Sunday like it is an ancient relic, because it is not. Because there are people with power in this very moment. So Professor, we only have a few more minutes in show right now. I want to give you some time to formulate your final thoughts on this right here.
I think that in America, regardless of what side of the bipartisan beef you call yourself to be on, we like to use what I call the trick of time. Well, what Dr. Calvin Warren called a trick of time. Acknowledging that a third of Americans was alive during, Jim Crow, and acknowledging how when individuals and this in 2023 talk about Jim Crow, we're told that we're going too far in the past. You're not told you're going too far in the past when you want to celebrate popping firecrackers and eating barbecue for July the 4th. Now, me going and talk about the 1840s or the 1850s, I'm told I'm being a victim and I'm going too far in the past. But you're able to feel inspired and empowered by saying, "Give me liberty or give me death," and that happened well before the time you tell me it's going too far in the past.
It did. So we're gonna, yeah, we're gonna
go. That's it.
Yeah, no, we're gonna continue this. This is to be continued because I talk about these kind of issues on the show all the time. So we will do that. Well, that is our show for today. We are so incredibly honored to have had Professor Conscious Lee on our show. We will have him back. Thank you all so much for watching us today. And you know exactly what I want you to do about this time. I want you to keep the faith and I want you to keep the fight. Until next time.